Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Penn. I'll be your moderator today. This is, of course, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan press conference. And today we're very honored to introduce and to cross-examine Japan's newest political party leader. This man's name is Keiichiro Asao. He's a long-term member of the Diet from Kanagawa Prefecture, I believe. And if you're wondering, where is Ms. Takamatsu? She's our interpreter. She's not here today because Mr. Asao also happens to be one of the best English speakers in the National Diet. So he's going to give his remarks and take your questions in English. He will give a presentation, I understand, of about 10 to 15 minutes to begin. And then we will move on to your Q&A. So please give a warm welcome and your full attention to our guest, Mr. Keiichiro Asao. He's going to cheat.
Well, thank you, Michael. It is an honor to be here in front of the Foreign Correspondents Club here. And I'm sure I see some of the faces that I know from a long time ago. And also, Michael was a friend through an acquaintance of mine, and it's a pleasure to be here. And also, allow me to be sometimes to be slow, because usually I think and talk in Japanese so that my operating software in my brain is further outdated than Windows XP, probably like Windows 2000. And so that's, I don't hear any laughter here, so I should say this joke in Japanese again. 普段はですね、日本語で喋ってるので、英語の私のなんていうんですかね、脳の中のソフトウェアは Windows XP よりもはるかに遅い、多分 Windows 2000ぐらいだと思いますので、どうぞ時々英語がゆっくりだったら許してくださいと言ったんで、本当はそこで笑ってもらえるはずだったんですが、誰も笑ってくれなかったのがちょっと残念かなと。Okay, having said that, I will present my thoughts after succeeding the president's role as new president of New York Party after the financial scandal of Mr. Watanabe. My focus, my vision, is to focus in what the voters expected us to do. And I believe your party is the only party in Japan that was founded solely on the idea of small government and less government interventions. Many other parties in Japan favor government intervention through making policies that would favor certain industries, certain people, but our idea is that it is basically the responsibility for, particularly for economic policy, to focus on market and market-based economic policy. And so, again, my vision is that we should go back to the original founding idea and philosophy of having small governments and less government interventions. That would help Japan politically, and also if you compare both the two leading parties in Japan, that is LDP and Democratic Party of Japan, which basically favor bigger governments. LDP used to favor bigger governments through giving funds through industry, particularly through construction industry. DPJ, on the other hand, favored the idea of giving funds directly to the people. So both favor basically bigger governments. Our idea, again, is smaller governments. So we favor smaller governments, and to accomplish smaller governments, we would have three basic thoughts. One, again, is streamlining government procedures. Your party, I believe, is famous among the Japanese public that we have been favoring this idea of streamlining Japanese government procedures. I could go on for examples of how we could go accomplish that, but I will let that to the questions. And also, we favor market-oriented, market-based economic policy. So we do favor that. We have been supporting BOJ to change their monetary policy to easing the funds flow, and it has been done through the President Kuroda. But we further expect him to easing his policy in conjunction with tax cuts, and also at the same time deregulation should happen at the same time. Deregulation, by definition, is deflationary to begin with, because some of the industries that is protected by regulation is, if deregulation happens, they may lose some of the jobs that they have been providing. However, in the long run, of course, deregulation would help enhance the underlying growth possibility of our economy. And therefore, deregulation, because it is deflationing at the first stage, it should be combined with easing of the central government and also tax cuts rather than giving public sector, giving construction works. The reason why we favor tax cuts, there are two reasons why we favor tax cuts. One, if the government pumps up construction works to counter economic downturn, it will only have the money that flows among the market is much less compared to tax cuts. The reason is simple. If you suppose that the corporate tax rate is 40%, to receive a tax cut of say 100 million, you would have to use funds amounting to 250 million, because 250 million times 40% is 100 million. But if you have a construction works of 100 million, the money that would move in the market is only 100 million. So if we use tax cuts, the more money is going to move in the market. And secondly, because of the great earthquake, there is shortage in the labor force in the construction works. That is particularly so in the northern part of Japan. I have talked with the mayor of Ofunato of Iwate Prefecture last year, and he said that simple labor works in his city, the effective job rate in his city is 2 times. That is, for a simple construction work, there are 2 jobs open and there's only 1 applicant. And what is more amazing is that for project managers of the construction sites, it is 20. That is, there are 20 project sites, and there's only 1 project manager applying for that job. And therefore, even if the Abe government decided to pump up construction works after raising the consumption tax this April, I don't think the projects will be implemented, and therefore the funds will not go into the market, and that will not be a good sign for the economy. And therefore, we favor tax cuts, both by having a free depreciation schedule and also having dividends calculated at a before tax level. This is quite important, but it might be less easier. It might be not easy to understand, but dividends are paid out of after-tax money. The dividends are taxed at individual level, but it is not taxed at a corporate level. That is, if, say, a company like Toyota pays dividends, it can only pay from after tax. And if they pay to individual like Michael, then if he lives in Japan, by the way, he has to pay 20% of the dividends he received. But if Toyota pays dividends to Michael Corporation, it won't be taxed. So there's a inequality in the level of dividends is taxed. And your party's proposal is that we should have dividends placed in a level at a before tax level, so that if major corporations, by the way, in Japan have many cash flows that's not been used, and if they pay out dividends, then it's tax free, and so that will give them some incentives to pay dividends. That would, I believe, will help at least the stock prices and hence the economy, at least in how people view the economy. So those are our policies of market-friendly economic policy. And also, we are a strong supporter of decentralizing central governments. In other words, compared to some of the other countries, some of the other democratic countries, Japan has big, stronger central government with weaker local governments. Our belief is that, your party's belief is that local governments should have autonomy in many areas so that they can decide what they want to do. And that would change how we run this country by having different types of local governments in different districts, and therefore have diversity in this country. So those are the three ideas that your party, it has been presenting, and I think these three ideas should be where we should focus after having this party president change. And having done so, I believe that we could capture public support again, and we will deal with the issues that we have with regard to former President Yoshimi Watanabe, as we have third-party member looking into the details of what has happened. And by the end of April, at least by the end of April 25th, we will have some sort of report that will be presented to the public, and it will be presented by third-party members. And those are the things that I would like to present to you, and after that, I would like to welcome any questions. Thank you. Or should I?
All right, well, as you see, he went right to the meat of the presentation, very direct information about his party's plan now that he has become the president. We will open this up to questions and answers now. The microphone is over there. When I call on you, please give your name and affiliation, and then ask your question. So I'll be seeing hands from now. Okay, I see Andy in the back. And while Andy is asking his questions, those of you who are very shy people can work up the courage to ask the questions you really want to ask.
Okay, my name's Andy Klein. I'm with WCN-TV.com. Your party is a proponent of the TPP, is that correct? Okay. So Obama is coming in a couple days, and he'll be discussing the TPP with Abe. But critics of the TPP accuse the agreement of having too much power. For example, it would allow multinational corporations to sue governments in a private international tribunal that could overturn environmental, labor, and any other laws that limit profit, awarding taxpayer-funded damages in the multi-millions. So what is your response to this?
Okay, thank you. It's a good question. I think the mechanism whereby the investors could sue the government could work as a favor for Japanese investment outside as well. From what I understand is that if there is no difference in terms of regulation vis-a-vis foreign direct investment and domestic investments, then it is okay. I think the only term that investors could go to private tribunal is when there is a difference in the treatment of foreign direct investments with the domestic investments. And this mechanism, I think, would particularly work well with a country that has more government-owned entities. And in case of TPP, Vietnam is part of the members that is likely to sign. And as you know, Vietnam has much more government-owned entities compared to Japan. And if this TPP norm becomes the norm or de facto standard in the Pacific, that means if China wants to join later on, they would also have to go by the rules. And obviously, China and Vietnam are the two countries that have most government-owned entities. I would say Malaysia also has many government-owned companies. But anyways, so to answer your question, it could be a good sign for our investment outside to those countries that have signed this, that is going to sign a TPP agreement. Having said that, the next question is whether the Japanese companies are ready to go to either private tribunal or foreign courts to protect their investments. I know there are only one or two cases where Japan has signed an investment treaty where the Japanese companies could go to international private tribunal. I think there's only one incident that they have went to international tribunal. So even though the funds that we have going out of Japan is unfortunately much bigger currently than direct investments into Japan, Japanese investors may not use this mechanism, but that's up to the private sector.
If I may follow up myself with another TPP-related question, I believe I read in the newspapers yesterday that the Democratic Party of Japan is considering some sort of legislative action because they feel the government is not providing the Diet with any information about what's actually in the TPP agreement. Do you share their discontent, or do you feel it's natural that the government needs that secrecy to continue its negotiations?
Well, I believe that the negotiations is going on, so I don't think the government should reveal all of the what's going on. And also, you would have to take into account that at the end of the day, when the negotiation is done, this treaty has to be signed and approved by both houses, and particularly House of Representatives. Otherwise, it won't come into effect. And therefore, the discussion in the Diet should happen afterwards. And we should give the government free hand of negotiation, and the negotiations should be kept for secret. Having said that, one thing that I would like to add is that if I were in the negotiation team, I would focus more on daily products and beef rather than rice. And the reason is quite simple. The competitor for Japanese rice is California, rice produced in California. I lived in California for 2 years, and I know that it doesn't rain in California. and they have to gather water from Nevada. And the water rights in California, it's a state law, but there's a strict law that, and you cannot gather water easily. Just because we have opened up our rice market, the farmers in California cannot get the water necessary to produce rice. On the other hand, and by definition, and not by definition, but the nature it gives the most product that is produced in agriculture is the product that is suited to that environment. And Japan is suited to producing Japanese rice, and California is not. They have to gather water from somewhere, and it's probably also damaging their environment if they have expanded their production. On the other hand, daily products. Our environment is not really ready to have cows and produce beef because we have a smaller land, and therefore if we compete, if we open up the daily products like that, such as cheese and butter, it will be very difficult for us to compete with New Zealand and Australia and probably U.S. and also beef likewise. And therefore, if I were, and I'm saying if I were because I'm not in the team, if I were in the negotiation team, I would focus in protecting daily products and beef over rice, because rice could be protected just by changing the policy.
Okay, I'm open to the next question. Christoph.
Süddeutsche Zeitung, Germany, Neidhardt. By definition, a political party is an organization that represents a part of the society in politics. In that sense, Minamoto is probably the most absurd name for a political party. Only the Communist Party of the Soviet Union thought they represent everybody, and maybe LDP too. You haven't said anything about who should vote for you, who you would represent. So far, you represented Watanabe, was Watanabe Noto, actually. Now, the temporary workers should not vote for your program. The small size enterprises, probably not. Women, probably not. Basically, you are appealing to LDP voters, aren't you?
No, I don't think so. That's a very good question, but I think you have wrong understanding. The reason is that for instance, I said we favor less government intervention. Is LDP favoring less government intervention? My answer is no. They're favoring more government interventions to particular industry, to protect particular industries. As for instance, they would like to protect the rice-producing farmers, and therefore they have different ideas in TPP. Temporary workers, I think they would vote for us because we favor equal payment for equal job. And I think we are very much clear on this. Women should vote for us because we favor equal payment for equal job. And so we are appealing to those who have less benefit, who receive less benefit from government interventions. And I think that is appealing to many of us in Japan, and because those who receive government benefits from government interventions is minority in Japan, and it should be minority in most countries, because if it's majority, then government itself would collapse. For instance, like I'm not criticizing, but if from what is reported. For instance, in case of Greece, 1/3 or 1/4 of their people were working in the public. They received government money, taxpayers' money, and then they had to collapse. Therefore, by definition, I believe that people who receive either direct benefit or indirect benefit from the government, if they are a major part of the society, then the country would collapse. And I don't think yet we have those people as a major part of the society. And therefore, I believe Minna no To is good naming. Although I'm not saying 100% of the Japanese people would agree to what I say.
All right, yes, Siegfried.
Siegfried Nidl, freelancer from Germany. If you say temporary voters should vote for your party, do you favor abolishing a current employment system with lifelong employment, seniority payment? Do you think it should be changed?
Well, the answer is yes, in the following sense. In most countries in Europe, particularly countries like Holland, Netherlands, they have this agreement that workers should share their jobs by reducing the time to work by 70% and have more workers to work. And the mechanism that it works is because people receive the payment based on the time and whatever you do for your work. But here, people who has full-time employment, status, would receive more payment time-wise, hourly-wise, compared to those who do not have the full-time employment status. And of course, full-time employment, those who have full-time employment status has lifetime employment guaranteed, basically, if you work for big corporations. For instance, when Japan Airlines went bankrupt, even when they were close to going to bankrupt, it was very difficult for Japan Airlines to fire or have people leave the company on their own will. But would that help those and to as a buffer? Bigger corporations would use the temporary workers as a buffer, because you don't know what production is needed next year. You would want to have some sort of buffer. If you have all the members having full-time employment status, you can't use that. So your party's idea, what we have proposed in the last election, is that we should allow companies to solve the issues of the employment by having companies pay certain amount of lump sum fee to have people laid off. This is a new idea which has not been said in the Japanese politics. And this also would help those workers working in smaller corporations. If you work for a small corporation and if you're told you're fired, basically you're fired. And the authorities would do nothing about that, although it is not allowed for bigger corporations. So there's a double standard in Japan. And we would like to have a single one standard, that is, if you are required to pay for, say, annual amount of salary, and then you can fire people. And that is a benefit for those who are working in smaller companies. And it is a benefit for those who are working as a part-time or temporarily in bigger corporations, because then there would be less incentives for bigger corporations to have people in a temporary status.
Okay, I see Mr. Hasegawa.
My name is Hasegawa from Radio Nikkei. First, you were elected as a representative of your party, Democratic Way. However, our imagination to your party is Mr. Watanabe's party. How do you make new image as a non-Watanabe party? And also, what is how is the future position of Mr. Watanabe?
The image is very important, and I think the image received in Japan and also the image received internationally is important, and that's why I'm here in the Foreign Correspondents Club today. And I believe the time that I have succeeded Mr. Watanabe until today is the shortest among new party presidents in any Japanese political parties. In other words, that's why the reason behind that is that we believe that image outside of Japan is as important as image inside of Japan. And if we could obtain good image outside of Japan, that would help change the image in Japan. And I would like to stress the fact that our new executives in your party is very much globally trained. That is, new Secretary General Mr. Mizuno used to work in Al Gore's Senate office. He used to work in Al Gore's Senate office, not in the Vice President's office, of course, but in his Senate office. And also, the policy chief, Mr. Nakanishi, used to be Vice President and number 2 in J.P. Morgan's operation in Japan, which means that he understands both international economy as well as Japanese economy. And so by having these members represent your party, I think we could change the image and also we would like to send this idea and philosophy that we will focus on streamlining the government procedures, having much more market-oriented economic policy, and decentralizing government procedures. And secondly, how would Mr. Watanabe contribute to your party? He, in his announcement in the press, he said that he would like to contribute as a common soldier, and I would accept him as contributing as a common soldier.
Okay, if I may follow up on the political side of things, I think it fits well with Hasegawa's question. At the moment, public opinion polls show that your party's support is less than 1%, and you're not alone. Most of the political parties in Japan right now have rather abysmal public support rates, with basically the exception of the Liberal Democratic Party. It seems that the project to make a two-party system right now looks to be in serious doubt. The LDP is the great gargantuan, and the rest look like midgets jumping around their heels. How do you see your political leadership and that of other opposition leaders rise to the point where you can begin to have a real impact on policy?
Okay. To begin with, I believe that probably majority of the public would favor less government intervention and smaller governments. And if we focus on this idea, I think we could capture more support than we have today. So it is very important to send messages out from your party, from my party, to the public in all the possible means. And again, that's why I'm here in Foreign Correspondents Club. How do I see the leadership of other parties? I think they are trying to send messages as well, but some leaders in some parties may not be as vocal as some of the others. And also, I think the other issue is that to send a message that your party in Japan is not a revisionist of the history, which we have been saying for a long time. Some leaders of other parties are at least trying to revise the history in their own ways. But I don't think that is what we should do right now. Although we will have the historians check whatever is a fact.
All right, allow me to follow up one more time. There maybe are three models. One might be to have a large single opposition party like Shinshinzo style, New Frontier Party, all coming together. A second might be some sort of alliance of parties which do not actually merge with one another. And a third would be for each of the opposition parties to kind of go its own way and to try to build up its own brand. Which do you see as the future for the political system?
Well, I think it could be in all three patterns could happen, but I think the mistake that New Frontier Party has that they had made is that they did not share the philosophy. Let me put it this way: not all the members shared the philosophy that New Frontier Party wanted to present. That is, the only philosophy that were shared is that they are counterpart to LDP. In other words, if you have a big chunk to LDP, they could be the biggest opposition and therefore win support. But what would you want to do after winning the power? That's more important than having a big chunk. And although having said that, I don't 100% deny having a bloc like New Frontier Party style, if and only if the basic philosophies are shared. And as I said, both LDP and DPJ, while they were in the government at least, are not as keen as having smaller governments and less government interventions. And what is needed in Japan, from what I believe and members of your party believe, is that less government interventions and smaller governments. And this idea, again, will be bought by many voters.
Okay, I'm looking to the floor. Christoph again.
What you just mentioned about not shared common philosophy is a main problem in Japanese politics. I mean, you have in any of the Japanese parties, except for the communists, you have a wide range of opinions. Do you say Minato Noto has a common philosophy, except of those three points you just mentioned? I mean, will Minato Noto speak in one voice on Yasukuni, on Senkaku, on TPP, or is it just those 3 points where you share a philosophy?
We will speak in one voice in all those three areas that you have mentioned, Yasukuni, TPP, and Senkaku. Senkaku, of course, is our territory, and no one in Minato, your party, is denying this idea. TPP, everyone is agreeing to having TPP signed. Unfortunately, some members that left Minato, by the way, were against TPP, but we have those members leave Minato, so everyone would speak in one voice. As far as Yasukuni is concerned, we have members that would visit Yasukuni, but we don't have any members, again, that would want to revise the history.
Okay, I'm looking to the floor again. Okay, I see Siegfried again. The active minds are becoming clear.
Siegfried Nidl again. What's your position on nuclear policy? On nuclear policy, I think one point is, I think if you in favor of decentralization of the state, it would be the best to abolish nuclear power, to decentralize energy. So how do you think about it?
We have already announced in our policy sets of agenda that we would have no nuclear power plants in Japan by the end of 2020 or earliest stage of 2030. And the mechanism to accomplish this is to split the grid and the power plants. In other words, currently the power companies have a monopoly of the grid, and also they have the power plants. And if you monopolize the grid, anyone in this room cannot buy electricity from TEPCO if you're individual currently. And the government has proposed a bill that would allow individual to purchase electricity from other companies, and it may happen, say, from 5 years or 6 or 7 years from now, that you may buy electricity from other companies, but the grid is still part of TEPCO. Then would TEPCO want to favor their own power plants, or would they want to favor someone that's coming from outside? The answer is simple. Therefore, we have proposed that the grid should be separated from the power plants, and therefore, and if you have the grid being separated from the power plants, then the unit cost of production of the 1 kilowatt hour produced by burning natural gas, particularly importing the shale gas from the United States or some cheaper gas from outside, is cheaper than producing 1 kilowatt hour of electricity from nuclear power plants. And therefore, we will have the market abolish the nuclear power plants. That's why the mechanism that we have.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, I see Andy in the back. And then this gentleman.
On the point of deregulation, deregulation played a major role in the financial collapse. This is a concerted effort on the part of big business to let business just be business and government step aside. But when the collapse happened, they were all hands out to the government. So do you see any good part of regulation? And if so, can you give us some examples?
Well, the example that you've given is, I think, an area we need to have regulation. And the reason why I say that is because financial institutions can borrow in case in Japan, you can have a deposit up to 10 million yen, which have a government guarantee. Basically, you can, if you have a government guarantee, you can borrow at a very low interest rate. And you can bet the money that you have borrowed on options or whatever. If you have a good bet, then you may make a lot of money. But that is not that the system is expecting. If you are given guarantee, meaning if the taxpayers have to pay if something happens, then you should have at least some sort of regulation so that the financial institutions would not bet the monies that they have borrowed at a low cost, because that's not fair. And there are some areas where regulations should work. For instance, we have proposing that the government should look into the industry sector by sector by 47 prefectures and raise the lowest or raise the minimum wage. And the reason behind that is that it is much more effective than having Mr. Abe asking big corporations to raise the wage. And the other reason, as I said before, some sectors have shortage of labor. In other words, it is very difficult for them to hire or have even temporary workers. And in those sectors, we could raise the minimum wage and have that effect spread to outside. And it won't hurt because these companies are having hard time recruiting anyways.
Okay, this gentleman here.
Thank you for opening the floor to the non-members. I would like to ask you two questions.
Name and affiliation.
Akio Shina from NHK News. And first on Mr. Watanabe's money scandal. You just said that you are expecting the report to be presented at least by 25th, but you are going to have the board members meeting tomorrow. Can we expect the report to be presented to the board meeting by tomorrow? And also related to that, some reports say that there are voices that are expecting that are expecting to deport Mr. Watanabe from the party, meaning that protecting the party is much more important than protecting Mr. Watanabe himself. Are you aware of those voices? And if so, how are you going to face those voices as president?
The third-party report is done by third party, and I don't have control over when the report is ready. And so, but I have been assured, but it will be at the latest be ready by April the 25th. So it's not in my responsibility to have them make the report faster or slower. It's up to them. And third party, by the way, is that we have many members, many lawyers and accountants, but 2 lawyers who will have their names published in the report, and 1 accountant that will be published in the report. And I think these professionals are very cautious to have their names on the report, because if they have their reports and if the report is not to the professional level that they believe, they would probably seek for more on the report. So that's the only thing that I can say at this moment. The board meeting is set tomorrow, but we can have extraordinary board meeting anytime, so that's not a problem. The second part of the question, I have not heard any voice directly to me. So, and I believe the report could be, if it is published, I think that would send a good message to the public as well.
Okay. I have another question waiting in my brain, and that's Seikinin Yato, which means responsible opposition parties. Some months ago, Prime Minister Abe, probably referring to your party and the Japan Restoration Party, described these parties as responsible opposition parties. And many analysts believed, especially in the last period of the Watanabe presidency, that your party was angling to become a coalition member of the current government, perhaps replacing the influence of new Komeito. From your perspective now that you're president, do you see joining the government as a coalition party as a viable option to implement your policies, or do you see yourself as an opposition party first?
I think what is important is implementing the policy. Joining the coalition is not. If it is a way to implement the policy, then that should not be denied. But if joining the coalition itself were the objective, then it should be denied, because what we have promised to the voters, again, is have less government intervention, more market-friendly economic policy, and streamlining the government procedures. If those could be done, I think, and we will propose the Abe government that those should be done, and if he accepts that they will be done, then it's fine. So to answer your question, what is the goal? The goal is to implement the policy. The goal is not solely to winning the position.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody wants to jump in. And I'm seeing Christoph. Anybody else want to jump in before Christoph? All right, sold, Christoph.
First, I'm not sure you have answered Michael's question, because we see how much Komeito can do as a coalition member. So if I draw a logical conclusion, your answer is no, but I didn't hear you say no, that you wouldn't join a coalition. But my question is different. Japan lacks behind such modernized countries as Azerbaijan when it comes to gender equality. Now, you just said you want to women should vote for you because you fight for equal pay. How many women do you have in your party leadership, and why no one among those three men? Wouldn't that make a change?
We have 2 members of the Diet among the 22 members of the both houses, House of Representatives and House of Councilors. We would like to have more members elected, and we had many women candidates run for the election held last year. Unfortunately, only 2 members won the election last year. We had many candidates, but unfortunately, only 2 could win the election. We will keep on recruiting good candidates, female candidates, in the future. And in the local assembly, we have many female members in the local assembly. So I believe that we could recruit good candidates again in the future election. And I hope that they will win the election. Winning election is, in any country, I think it's a very tough job, but I believe that if we could recruit good candidates, we will have more members than 10% or so that we have currently in the National Diet.
All right, before we move into the final bit, we have a captive audience of the Japanese television media here. Would you like to make a final comment in Japanese for the benefit of the people back home?
Well, そうですかね。今日は、非常に、貴重な機会を与えていただきましてありがとうございました。冒頭申し上げましたようにですね、日本国内で、メッセージを送るのと同時に海外にメッセージを送っていくということが、今の日本の政治においては私は大変重要なことだというふうに思っております。もとより、みんなの党はですね、小さな政府、先ほど来申し上げておりますように市場重視の経済政策や、あるいは徹底した行政改革、地方分権の推進ということを大きな政策の柱としておりますけれども、現在の国際環境を考えた場合にはですね、我が国は決して、その国際環境的に隣国と例えば他のヨーロッパの国と比較した場合にですね、いい関係にあるわけではないということだと思いますが、みんなの党はその、外交、特に安全保障の政策においては、日米同盟を重視しているということを申し上げておりますけれども、その観点からもですね、歴史修正主義には立たずにですね、しっかりとした外交安全保障政策にも、今日その質問出ませんでしたけれども取り組んでいきたいと
いうふうに思っておりますし、我々が主張しております小さな政府路線というのは、多分多くの国において、一定程度の支持を集めている政策だというふうに思っておりますが、残念ながら我が国にそのことをはっきりという政党が今までなかったので、しっかりとその原点に立ち返って訴えていきたいというふうに思っています。
All right. Well, I have two bits of good news after we give a warm round of applause to our guest today. The first bit of good news is that, as is the tradition of the club, I will give him a one-year honorary membership to the club. Now, the good news part of it is that in the anteroom before he came here, he was expressing a great deal of desire to actually use it. So it may not be that we see him at this press conference and he disappears for a year. He says that he may actually come to our premises and use it from time to time. So that would be very welcome. So thank you very much for coming. And the second bit of good news is that for foreign journalists, he's in the midst of doing outreach to us. So if you would like to come up and exchange meishis with the new leader of your party, please feel free to come up and he will exchange meishis with you at this time. So thank you very much for coming. That is the end of our event.